The room still hummed with the residual tension from yesterday. I could feel it lingering in the air like static. Even though the board members had dispersed, their polished smiles hiding whatever judgments they'd made in real time. Her voice had been sharp, deliberate, cutting across the space like glass shattering. "I don't need you anymore," she had said, not in private, but in front of everyone. I had smiled. Not out of triumph, there was none in that, but from the quiet recognition that life sometimes unfolds in ironic ways. Ambition had always been her strongest pulse, and now it had overtaken every other rhythm. The promotion had come with a throne, and apparently, I was to be removed from her orbit entirely. I remember the look on her face just before the words left her mouth, a brief flicker of vulnerability, quickly replaced by steel. The applause from a few board members felt rehearsed. A few others looked uneasy. I had remained still, letting the silence stretch. She had expected shock, maybe anger, certainly tears. She would have enjoyed the drama. Instead, I had offered nothing more than that quiet smile. That night, I wandered the apartment alone, the weight of the declaration settling around me. I replayed the months leading here, the late nights when she stayed at the office, the evenings I came home to an empty kitchen, the conversations that ended mid-sentence, her eyes already elsewhere. Ambition had always been part of her, but I had thought love could coexist with it. I was wrong. I paused in our bedroom, my hand brushing the edge of the unmade bed, remembering a quiet evening not long ago. We had shared a rare glass of wine, no distractions, no phones. Just the muted glow of the city beyond the window. She had laughed at a small joke I made, the kind of laugh that softened the edges of her world. That moment seemed like a lifetime away. Morning came differently. The city was gray, but the light through the blinds was sharp, revealing dust motes dancing lazily in the sun. I dressed slowly, methodically, noting that the apartment felt emptier now than it had last night. Her words echoed faintly, yet the sense of finality I expected hadn't taken root. At the office, the shift became apparent in a way she hadn't anticipated. The board meeting began as usual, but there was a subtle recalibration of attention. The chairman, someone who rarely interjected, addressed her directly after a presentation misstep, calmly but unmistakably correcting her course. There was no humiliation, only authority asserting itself, a quiet reminder that power in the corporate world was shared, not inherited overnight. Her sudden independence had collided with institutional oversight. I watched from the side, letting the moment unfold without interference. Her jaw tightened, her tone clipped, but she couldn't fully control the narrative around her. Colleagues whispered in hallways, glances lingered, subtle shifts in seating and scheduling began to reflect this new dynamic. My role had not been active in this correction, yet the benefit was clear, a silent validation that being sidelined by her proclamation had not translated to professional or personal obliteration. In the lunchroom, I overheard fragments of conversation. Her decisions, once unquestioned, were being probed with cautious rigor. There was an edge of unease in her voice when she responded to a colleague's query, a subtle falter in confidence that had been ironclad just days before. I didn't gloat. That wasn't the point. What mattered was the alignment of consequence with ambition, a lesson in humility delivered by the architecture of the organization itself. Later, I returned to my office. I sat by the window, the city stretching beyond in soft monotones, and let my mind wander. Relief mingled with lingering hurt. She had made her choice, and I had made mine, which was mostly to step aside, observe, and absorb the clarity the morning had delivered. Power had shifted, but not violently. Dignity had not been claimed through vindictiveness, only preserved through restraint. I thought about her as she walked past the boardroom later that afternoon, shoulders squared, eyes alert, but tension visible beneath the surface. The ambition that once drew me to her now seemed brittle, fragile against the framework she had underestimated. I didn't approach, didn't speak. Observation, in its quiet, can be more potent than confrontation. Memory kept intruding, as it tends to do when silence dominates. I recalled arguments over trivialities, moments where I had tried to negotiate, compromise, or remind her that we were partners. They now seemed insignificant in comparison to the architecture of her new life, which had been hastily built on the assumption that removing me was a step toward freedom. She had misjudged the reach of structure and authority beyond her. Evening arrived, and the apartment was still. I unpacked a small lunch I had brought from home, eating slowly, with a focus that mirrored the day's quiet unfolding. My phone buzzed with messages from colleagues congratulating me on how I had handled the transition, comments that were both curious and admiring. It was strange, this indirect acknowledgement of presence in a story from which I had been publicly excised. By the time night fell, I had walked through the apartment again, noticing the emptiness differently. I was alone, yes, but also composed. The narrative of yesterday's dismissal no longer dictated the rhythm of my day. The morning had rewritten what I thought would be an irreversible rupture, and in that, there was a calm victory, not shouted, not celebrated, but lived. I didn't anticipate her entering the room again or apologizing. That wasn't part of the new reality. Instead, I accepted the quiet truth: relationships can end while dignity remains intact, ambition can soar while consequence quietly asserts itself, and observing the balance of both, without interference, often delivers the most clarity. As I closed the blinds and settled into a chair, I glanced at the empty side of the sofa. The stillness was familiar, yet not unbearable. Morning had changed everything, yes, but not in ways she could have foreseen, and perhaps that was the point. The external turning of authority had realigned the world around us, yet internally, I had reclaimed a space she could not touch. I thought briefly of her laughter from that evening we shared months ago. It seemed distant, like a fragment of a life that could no longer exist alongside the person she had become. Ambition had transformed her, and betrayal had reshaped my understanding. In the quiet of the apartment, I let the edges of anger, disappointment, and residual affection blur together. The chair creaked as I leaned back, a soft punctuation to the day. Outside, the city continued, indifferent but rhythmic. Inside, I breathed, allowed thought to settle, and acknowledged the new equilibrium. She had sought to erase me with words. The morning had reminded everyone, in subtle but unmistakable ways, that consequence often travels independently of intention, and in that quiet observation, the story of yesterday had finally resolved, not with triumph, not with vengeance, but with clarity, restraint, and a calm, undeniable assertion of dignity.